So continuing with Mark, we've only got one more month. There's a few more weeks to go to finish out Mark. And, one of the things that we ask of the text every week is, what does this passage teach me about people? And I think that's one of the biggest things that we can learn. And we find that people are not faithful. We see the abandonment happen, the denial happen, the betrayal happen. All of these things all come together. And I think this passage really gets to this question. If I am not faithful, will Jesus be faithful? Will Jesus be faithful even if I am not faithful? And I am super encouraged by that. And I think a lot of this also fits within the incredible, the suffering servant chapter or passage in Isaiah, starting in 52 and then going through Isaiah 53. And in particular, I want to call out Isaiah 53, verse 6. This is really important for us to understand. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to his own way. There isn't an exception to that. Each of us has turned to his own way. In other words, we've gone the way that we want to go, not the way that God wants us to go. And the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. That sums up the gospel for us. That is the idea of the bad news, who I am without God, going my own way, and who Jesus is as the sacrifice, as the one who went in my place. And again, there's a big emphasis here on the denial, the abandonment. And I just want to highlight just real quickly a bunch of things that really fit into that. All gone astray, all unfaithful. First, we see that Jesus says, hey, you guys are all going to fall away from me. And Peter's like, no way. I'm not going to be. I don't know about those guys, but I will even go to your death. And Jesus told to them, and he's not believing it. He's not believing Jesus. He's not believing the plain words of Jesus. You'd think if Jesus, after all that he's done, had said that to them, that their response would be, oh, please, I believe you. Please help me. How do I avoid that? I don't want to do that. I don't want to go down there. But he's just flat out denying, I do not believe you. And it says there at the very last line of 31, and they all said the same. So this isn't just Peter. Peter's the leader of this, but they all think that. Secondly, we see an emotional abandonment. In the garden, he says to Peter, James, and John. Jesus says, he says to them, my soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch. And he encourages them to pray for him. And then Jesus falls on his face and just passionate, crying out to God, please help me, Lord, help me if there's any other way that this can be done. And that's where his heart is. And what's their response? They just fall asleep. I hope that if I was with one of you in this kind of moment and you were just sorrowful even unto death, like, man, I wish that I was even dead, like be so much better in this moment. And you were on your face just crying out to God for help. I hope that I would be there next to you crying out to God on your behalf. But he gets emotionally abandoned by his friends. They just fall asleep, even in his moment of greatest need. And then we see the betrayal. Judas, his longtime friend, one of his right-hand men, betrays him with a kiss. And then number 4, we see refusing to follow his plan. Peter, we know that it's Peter in verse 47. He's the one who grabbed a sword and started swinging it around and cut off this guy's ear. We know it's Peter from another gospel. But yet again, Peter is refusing to follow the plan that's Jesus. Remember how earlier in Mark, Jesus said, hey, I'm going to suffer all these things. I'm going to die, and then I'm going to raise from the dead. And Jesus said, no. That's not the plan. I don't like that plan. And Jesus tells him, get behind me, Satan. Peter is continuing. He's just going to take matters in his own hands. He's like, we're going to fight our way out of this. I don't like God's plan, is what Peter's saying. So in a sense, Peter is still with him and showing some courage, but it's just for Peter's plan, not for Jesus's plan. Number 5, do anything but be with Jesus. And that's what I've labeled for verses 51 and 52, where you've got this little interesting anonymous note of a young man that followed with nothing but a linen cloth on his body. So I guess he left home with just a sheet wrapped around him. And they seized him, but he left the linen cloth and ran away. That little note is only in the Gospel of Mark, not in the other 3 Gospels. And so scholars believe that this is a little autobiography from Mark, that Mark was there and he adds that note in just to say that I was one of those people that abandoned him as well. But what struck me about that, because it's kind of funny, he goes streaking through the woods. But what struck me about that is that Mark would rather run naked through the woods than be with Jesus. Jesus is willing to hang on a cross naked in order to be with Mark, in order to be with us. We are unfaithful, but Jesus is faithful. And then number 6, he gets falsely accused by a number of people, falsely accused by the council. Number 7, holding on to control. So in verse 61, there's a confrontation that he has with the chief priest. This is the guy, the high priest who's in charge of all the priests, who has a very special role before God under the whole Levitical priesthood order. But he doesn't want to relinquish control to even the Son of God. That's his motive for why he so opposes Jesus, is he doesn't like the fact that Jesus is stepping in on his control and his power. I don't like it when God steps in on my power. I don't like it when his plans kind of supersede or go against the plans that I have. And then number 8, denied in his time of need. And we see that with Peter in his final denial. Jesus told him he was going to deny him 3 times, and that's exactly what happened. Peter is nearby Jesus, trying to be faithful, but he refuses to even stand and identify with him when he's there. So keep in mind, though, that the love of Jesus, he is faithful through all of this, even in the midst of their unfaithfulness. And that reminds me of Romans 5:8. But God shows his love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. I mean, that is the heart of his love for us. He doesn't wait for us to take a step towards him and then he'll die for us. No, he laid himself down while we were still sinners, while we were still enemies of him. And I want to call attention especially to the super important part of Mark in chapter 14, starting at verse 61, this quick interaction that he has with the chief of priests. 61, it says, but he remained silent and made no answer. And this was because of all the accusations that are being thrown at him. He's just being silent. And again, the high priest asked him, just straight up, I'm going to ask you, rather than beat around the bush, let's straight up ask you, are you the Christ? Are you the Messiah, is what he's saying. And then he also, the Son of the Blessed. And that is another way of saying the Son of God. Because the Jewish people, especially at that time, believed that it was wrong and bordered on blasphemy to state the name of God. So they would say the Son of the Blessed instead of saying the name of God. So that's what he's saying. Are you the Messiah? Are you the Christ? Are you the Son of God? Just straight up ask him. Jesus straight up answers him. He says, I am. I am that. And then he adds some incredible detail. And these are little hyperlinks that Jesus is using to call our mind to incredibly huge prophecies and details that have been revealed in the Old Testament. He says, you will see the Son of Man. And there's a little link back to Daniel 7. Remember we talked about the Son of Man phrase, this idea of this one that's going to come on the clouds with power and majesty, seated at the right hand of God. He says, seated at the right hand of power. That's a hyperlink to Psalm 110. We're going to look at that in just a second. And coming with the clouds of heaven. There's Daniel 7 again. He is claiming a lot of gigantic things about himself, not just about being the Messiah, not just about being Son of God, Son of the Blessed, but all these other huge ideas. And one thing that I heard this week that I thought was really, really good in thinking about the Jewish idea at the time of the Messiah versus the reality of what Jesus was with the Messiah. A lot of times Jesus wasn't correcting their theology in terms of their theology being wrong. Usually what he was correcting them on was the magnitude of their theology. In other words, they had an idea of a Messiah that was correct, but not as big and as significant as the reality. So they had, in some ways, an idea of a Messiah being like another King David who's going to rescue them from the political powers of the day. And he's saying, no, that's true, but actually a lot bigger than that. He is God. And I don't want to jump ahead, but let me look back at Psalm 110. Psalm 110, we've heard Jesus quote this already. He says, "The Lord says to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool." And he's introducing this person who's understood to be the Messiah throughout the whole Psalm 110. There's a lot of incredible things packed in there, including verse 4. Check this out. The Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. In other words, God said, this is what is going to happen. I will not change my mind on this. And here it is. You, this person he's talking about, the Messiah, are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Now, Melchizedek is an unbelievable guy. If I was just talking to somebody the other day and thinking about how, as I was studying this, that if there's one person in all the Bible that I would love to know a lot more about, it's this dude, Melchizedek, because this guy was the king of a city named Salem, which was the city built in the exact location in the previous city to Jerusalem. He was a king and he was a priest of Yahweh, the God. Abraham, who's a foreigner and a pagan that God chose to be the father of his nation, father of the nation that would bring the Messiah, the hope into the world. He brings Abraham from this foreign nation to settle the land where Melchizedek actually already lives. But he is a king and a righteous man who is a priest to God long before any of the law gets instituted, long before Moses and all of that, long before all the Levitical priesthood. So he's this incredible, mysterious guy that Abraham encounters. Abraham actually gives a tenth of all of his wealth to Melchizedek, and Melchizedek blesses Abraham. And there's this incredible, interesting interaction that happens in Genesis. And then he's mentioned in Psalm 110. And then he's mentioned as well in Hebrews, and we're going to look at that in just a second. But so Jesus is saying that he is the Son of Man coming on the clouds. He's saying that he is king sitting at the right hand of power. In other words, God. And he's saying that he is a priest. He is that particular priest that's prophesied about in the order of Melchizedek. And there's so many huge things there. But keep this in mind, that a priest is somebody that is a go-between between people and God, the person that offers sacrifices on behalf of God, the person that in a way acts like the doorway to heaven, the doorway for us to move from darkness into paradise. That's the role that a priest played. But Jesus is the greatest and best forever priest, is what he's saying. So if I am not faithful, will Jesus be faithful to me? And we see right here in Mark that he is faithful. Even when he is denied, abandoned, emotionally abandoned, falsely accused, all these things by his closest friends, by his enemies, all these people. Jesus is faithful. We see in his prayer that he prays, God, if there's any other way, let's do it that other way. But not my will, but your will be done. Jesus is faithful and obedient to God. And look at what he says in Hebrews chapter 7 about Jesus and this Melchizedek mystery fellow. It says, but this one was made a priest with an oath by the one who said to him. So here's the oath, quoting Psalm 110. The Lord has sworn. In other words, God swore, he made an oath, and he will not change his mind. You, the Messiah, are a priest forever. You will be the one offering and coming between the Father and people, giving a doorway for us to approach the Father. This makes Jesus the guarantor of a better covenant. Now, why is that? The former priests were many in number because they were prevented by death from continuing in office. In other words, they were just regular dudes who had plenty of problems themselves. They died as well, but he holds a priesthood permanently because he continues forever. Consequently, he is able to save to the uttermost those who draw near to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. Think about that. He's sitting at the right hand of the Father, interceding on our behalf. Satan is whispering into our ears about how we failed, how you have messed up, you've done this wrong, that wrong. He goes to the Father and says, look at all the things that that person has done that are wrong. And largely, I think a lot of that's true. But Jesus is sitting at the right hand, whispering something different into the Father's ear. For it was indeed fitting that we should have such a high priest, holy, innocent, unstained, separated from sinners, and exalted above the heavens. He has no need, like those high priests, to offer sacrifices daily, first for his own sins and then for those of the people, since he did this once for all when he offered up himself. Think about that. A priest who's, instead of offering a lamb, he's going to offer himself so that it can be permanent. For the law appoints men in their weakness as high priests, because again, they're just regular guys. But the word of the oath, which came later than the law, appoints a son who has been made perfect forever. Now, the point and what we are saying is this: we have such a high priest. Even though we are unfaithful, he is faithful, one who is seated at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in heaven, a minister in holy places, in the true tent that the Lord set up, not man. So we can say, like what Paul says to the Philippians, not having a righteousness of my own that comes through the law. In other words, just like all the people we saw in this passage, I am unfaithful, but I have a righteousness that comes through faith in Christ, the righteousness from God that depends on faith. I am unfaithful, but he is faithful. Bad news. I have to recognize that. And I have to admit that. And then in faith, I trust that the righteousness of God is on me. When God sees me, he doesn't see my failures. He sees the righteousness of God that we see Jesus putting on display. In this passage, we see Jesus faithful all the way to the end, no matter what's being done to him. And we see ourselves in being, put under pressure, put in the right situation. We would do anything. We would go anyway. And just like it says in Isaiah 53, we all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him, the Messiah, what we deserve. That's our Jesus. Guys, let's celebrate and let's worship him, and let's be so thankful for the love of Jesus that he has given to us so that we can have a priest sitting at the right hand of the Father, telling the Father that that one is mine, that one is mine, that one is righteous before me, and she is my brother, my sister that can come into the throne room and be with us forever.